are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to in the inner courts. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to you in the inner courts. Oh, your garments smell of earth and aloe, of acacia. Oh, your garments smell of myrrh and aloe, of acacia, as I minister to you in the end.
Well, hello. It's good to see you all again. Tonight, we're back for another fantastic edition of Becoming a Linenite. It's been a while, y'all. And originally, I had intended to put out a tremendous amount of videos discussing the wonders of natural fibers found in the Sword of the Covenant. Yes. But, obviously, I got distracted. And, if I was really honest with you guys, I got dismayed. Yes. My countenance had fallen like Cain's in the garden. Outside the garden, I guess. I don't know. Cain maybe never treaded in the garden. That's interesting to think about. But we're going to be covering some of the wonders of fabrics tonight. And tonight I'm talking about suprafine linen. Like this right here, this is linen from Ireland. If you didn't know it, I literally love it. It's my favorite. And I've watched an inordinate amount of documentaries and videos and read historical texts about Irish linen. Because for whatever reason, the Irish just crush the linen life.
Flax fibers as they arrive at the mill for spinning. The fibers vary in length, and numbers of them may be stuck together. So they are drawn by hand over a series of metal spikes. These spikes separate the fibers and take out some of the shorter ones. The operator takes handfuls, or pieces as they're called, of these fibers and lays them down. He then places these pieces crisscross to make a bundle. Bundles large enough for convenient handling are taken away. They are now ready for the first machine process. It is in this process that the fibers are combed. This is a heckling machine, where the actual combing takes place. Let's follow the stages in this machine from beginning to end. First, a boy takes pieces from the bundle and places them, two at a time, in the machine. Here, like a letter U upside down, they hang over a bar of metal. Automatically, another bar is screwed down, thus clamping the two pieces together. They are now passing into the part of the machine where the combing or heckling is done. Only one leg of the U is dealt with at first. The other is combed later. Coming along from the left, the pieces turn at right angles and then pass between a series of steel combs on moving belts. At first, the pins or teeth of these combs are spaced about 6 to the inch, but at the far end of the machine, there may be as many as 60 pins to the inch. You can see the different spacing of the pins as they pass through the fibers. down the machine from left to right towards the boy. They're lifted up, moved on, then lowered to the combs. They come out. The first stage of the combing is finished, but notice that the fibers still vary in length.
Shout out to you, all my friends in Ireland. I love you and your families and your wonderful people and your delicious, buttery goodness that comes from your grass-fed cows. Great job on your grass out there. I've been studying a lot about grass lately too, because I want to keep livestock on a regular basis. And it's all about the grass, and it's all about the grazing, and it's all about the rotational grazing and fertilizer and sun and water and all of these things, guys, that I never once considered or regarded as important or even mattered. I was like, they're cows, right? They eat grass. It's what they do, I guess. Or hay or corn, apparently. When I was like 13 years old, I was in the Boy Scouts, right? The Boy Scouts of America. It's like the Small Mason Society of America. It's a good, like, fact-finding organization for recruiting children into the deeper societies of naughtiness in the world. But obviously they can teach some wonderful things. But you ever wonder why the Boy Scouts mandated that every time you guys would enter a ceremony or enter a meeting that you would have to oftentimes swear an oath, to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout law? Do you ever think about that? I did a video called I Pledge Allegiance to Liars, Knights, and Dragons. I would behoove you to check that out when it talks about pledging oaths. Basically, don't do it. Read Leviticus 5. Like, if you ever realize you pledged oaths or pledged allegiance to things that were terrible and not true and not of Yahweh, you should probably repent, be baptized, and come into the kingdom of absolute glory and awesomeness, which is outlined behind a giant white linen fence. Okay, the Bible is a living sword, right? It's spectacular, and it talks about linen constantly, but it also talks about fences for livestock and practical things like where to put your poop. Don't poop in the camp, right? Fundamentals. Not everybody's learned this clearly still in our society, or how to get water from donkey's jawbones. Did you know that story from Samson? It's not just such an epic story because he does significant damage to a bunch of human beings with a donkey's jawbone, but then he gets springs of living water to come out of that same donkey's jawbone. That story's epic. You ever read about any other donkeys in the Bible? Anyways, I'm getting distracted. Livestock. I had one of those times during a marathon weekend of a camping, I think they called it like jamboree, something like that. We went out to the plains of Kansas, borders of Colorado and Kansas, where Tornado Alley is like a legitimate thing. We went out there to do like 2 or 3 days, 3 days maybe, of like all intensive. You could earn like 30 merit badges if you were super dedicated, which I really wasn't. I was pretty bitter and miserable at my entire life at that point in my life. Horrible time. But the scouts offered an opportunity to handle knives and fire and get away from the people that gave me nightmares. So I loved it for those reasons. But during that, they asked us, hey, who wants to get the animal husbandry merit badge? And there's some mandatory merit badges that you needed in order to acquire your Eagle Scout or rank advance, which of course I was born and bred to become a scout for the Eagle. If you don't know what the Eagle is, look into the Phoenix. Another discussion for another day. But on my way to that, I was like, well, apparently I can check off animal husbandry. I think it was, and animal sciences. It was like 2 of those merit badges. And so they offered us an opportunity to go out to the giant feedlots where the cattle are, right? And where a giant pig farm was, where they did breeding of pigs. They took us to the pig breeding section, which was a nightmare. If you guys seriously still eat pork, it would behoove you to spend significant time with a pork feedlot. Just go there one time. Just go check out animal feedlots personally with your own eyes. Like, go volunteer at one for a week. Get a job at one. If you're really determined to eat those animals, even though, like he says in this book, The Sword of the Covenant, not to, because he knows better. He made your body. Shocker. But if you still want to, I would encourage you, go look with your own face upon these animals and see how they live. And then be like, do I really want to consume that? They eat the worst possible kinds of protein feed materials that exist. It's like our dog food and cat food. Do you know that we feed dead dogs and dead cats that have been ground up and turned into a base protein back to our animals and wonder why they're all sick and dying and full of cancer? Probably a problem in there. Anyways, I'm getting really sidetracked apparently into animal husbandry issues. That being said, I was at this feedlot, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a large cattle farm. Like, there was thousands and thousands of heads of cattle. Excuse me while I shake nightmare amounts of dust out of my eye. I've been in the fields again because I'm working by the sweat of my face, and it's exhausting, but I love it. Not all the time. Most of the time I'm pretty miserable, when I think about it. But then other times I'm elated because I get to eat the wonderful produce of land, and then it's wonderfully worth it. But it's the conflict of being on this side of creation. It's savage. It's the only way to put it. It's cursed some days. A lot of sweaty faces today. But that's what linen is for. Anyways, cows. The way they live on these feedlots, nothing like what we think unless you've really been there with your own face, because you cannot look at something and watch it on a YouTube video and know what it smells like. Like, there's no counterfeit to watching a giant animal get shoved into the stalks where they lock this thing's head into this thing, and then they inject all kinds of antibiotics and pills down its throat. They had this gun. The guy let us use a lot of these tools, which was terrific. But they had this gun. You held on to it, one handle here, and you grasped it. Almost like, a caulking gun that you use for pumping out tubes of grease or pumping out tubes of, like, RV deck leveling materials and stuff like that. It was just like that. But they loaded pills in there, huge pills. The pills were, like, yay big. And they would load this gun full of, like, antibiotics. And they would, when the cow was in there, in the stall, they'd shove that thing back in the back of their mouth, and they'd ram all these pills down their throat. Just savage. All at the same time, they're like branding, burning, cutting testicles off, crazy madness, burnt hair, cows screaming. Cows in the back of the line watching this are like, nightmares are ahead. Horrible conditions. Their feet are rotting off their bodies because they're standing and they get hoof rot. And so they're standing in these muck, which is just perpetually full of feces and urine and just waste. Like, dead animals die and decompose in there, and they're waste. They're just standing in this stuff continually. And this is like 12, 13, 14-year-old boys being like, oh yeah, okay. Like, we're all basically traumatized at this point and recognizing, like, I don't know that this is great. But they decided, of course, to show us how they feed them, which is what farmers do a lot. Feed and water your animals. And so what are they feeding him? Silage. It was a lot of silage. Which I didn't know what silage was, but silage was a lot of like the stuff we don't eat at the end of the conveyor belt of our corn production and soybean production and wheat production sides of life. And it was absolutely astounding to watch these animals who are standing and rotting and dying, only being alive because of artificial drugs being shoved down their throat by guns, are then being fed this waste, more waste. And then these were the animals that we all eat, right? We're like, I just am shocked that fast food costs $5 for a burger. Abominable prices these days. Can you believe inflation? Can you believe that meat is only $5? Do you know how much work it takes to grow an animal? I do, because now I've done it. I've raised meat on the hoof, and it's a literal investment. Like, you should invest, if you're gonna do it right. Invest in grass-fed animals. They're tremendous. Do it yourself, though, and then you can invest the sweat of your face there and leave an inheritance for your children, because you know what animals do, which is shocking? Multiply. If, like, the first commandment of the entire scripture that was ever given to man, really, guard. He made Adam to be a guardian, which is fantastic, which always brings me to knives and swords and shields. Adam was a guardian of the words, of the instructions of the Father, the loving instructions of the Father. But then when Adam was entrusted a wife, come on, what were those first commands? Be fruitful and multiply. So I challenge this to every single one of you husbands and wives out there. If you're not being fruitful and multiplying, you're literally breaking rule number 1 from the book of life. He's like, hey, here's the words of life. Don't reject them by shoving death inside your body so you guys can't produce more life. It's literally anti-law. It's like the most anti-biblical thing you could do. He says, go be fruitful and multiply. And people are like, yeah, but I don't want more children. So I'm going to take God into my own hands and control my life. I don't know why I'm on these tangents, but it's a nightmare. Animals, they won't do that naturally. Instead, they will be fruitful and multiply naturally to such an extent that your herds can grow abundantly. You ever read about Jacob? That's the founder of Israel. Out of his loins literally came the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a tremendous story. Maybe I'll get into that. No, I got to stay on track with this linen strategy. Okay. The most powerful investment materials on the earth that I realize literally he biblically blesses: food, water, clothing, linen, but he will bless you and your cattle. You always read like Deuteronomy 28. You guys read about the blessings. He's like, if you obey me, these are the cool verses people like to read. The next section is savagely brutal, terrifying. It's about like, if you don't, you get a lot of curses. You know what I'm saying? But listen, just check this out for a second. I'm going to read you 12 or 14 verses from Deuteronomy 28. I'm reading from the Scriptures translation because it's saucy. And it shall be, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim, to guard, to do all his commands. There's more of that guarding thing we talked about. Which I command you today, that Yahweh, your Elohim, shall set you high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim. Blessed are you in the city. Blessed are you in the field. Blessed is the fruit of your body and the fruit of your ground and the fruit of your livestock, the increase of your cattle, the offspring of your flocks. Blessed is your basket and your kneading bowl. By the way, my wife's going to crush a series on kneading bowls. Ladies, get kneading bowls. Sourdough. Grind your own grain. I am so wanting to talk about that, but I am inhibited at this time. Like Paul when he was inhibited by the Ruach to go into Asia. Same thing. Sometimes you can't go there. Anyways, blessed are you when you come in, and blessed are you when you go out. Yahweh causes your enemies who rise against you to be smitten before your face. They come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. Yahweh commands the blessing on you in your storehouses and in all to which you set your hand, and shall bless you in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You want to know just a perfect reference for how true that is? Pharaoh, right? King of Egypt, basically, selects Joseph, which is the first example we see of linen, the word linen being used in the Scriptures. Ready? This is the first moment. Let me show you about blessings of your storehouses. Most of us don't store, well, maybe. There's probably a lot more preppers these days than there once was. Finally got it. There's a lot more preppers probably around these days. You know what you should prep? Grain. Grain. It stores forever. We still have grain from Egypt, from like the time of pharaohs, which will sprout. You can plant it, and it'll still grow. Grain's amazing. Most of you need to eat fresh milled grain. It'll change your life. Look it up. Don't. Just read the Bible. It's in there, and you should do what it says. Check this out, though. This is a great story. And this is a great bridge. Ready? Let's do this. Joseph, right? If you didn't know about it, he gets more press coverage in the Scriptures of the Torah than any single person in the entire first 5 books of the Scriptures. He gets more focused attention on his story than anybody else for a serious reason, because Joseph is like an archetype. He's like the big outline figure of seriously important characteristics of what we want to see in our Messiah, but also in our Father and the Creator. He's like an outline figure for the whole story from Genesis to Revelation in his story. It's amazing. I've been digging into this for like weeks and weeks and weeks since we first put out Becoming a Linenite Part 1. By the way, if you haven't seen that, go watch it, because it's going to make a lot more of this make sense, what I'm getting into. But Joseph, his whole story, right, starts out as the favored one of his father, gets sent down to be like kinsman herder, shepherd, cattle herder with his brothers, and his father gives him a coat of many fabric colors, beautiful, like the covenant of the rainbow, which is all like being covered by Noah's covenant. There's so many parallels in the Bible. It's astounding. It's like a tree, not just any kind of tree. When I read the Bible, I'm finally starting to think, I'm starting to think a little more like a Hebrew than I did before, because the Hebraic concept of the world is like a banyan tree. Maybe I'll roll in a clip of a banyan tree. Maybe I'll roll in a clip of a strangler fig vine. A strangler fig tree. I got to show you guys these things. When I was down in the south, I saw these trees that swallowed other trees. And what they do is they literally can start at the top of a tree, and they can drop roots down. Like a bird can eat the seed of this strangler fig, and it can go poop in the crotch of another tree, which is crazy. That's like where a tree has like a Y shape, and there's some soil and stuff that gets trapped there, and a bird will poop there with that seed coming out. And then that strangler fig seed sprouts, and it begins to grow up, and then it drops roots down. And it'll drop them all the way, like 30, 40, 50, 60 feet, 70 feet, doesn't care. Strangler fig don't care. It drops them all the way to the ground. And once it touches the ground, it literally turns into a cable, like rock solid. It will grow and get so thick and strong and regular, like it starts sucking up so much nutrients, and it starts spreading up at the top too, and dropping more roots down and more roots down and more roots down, and just dangling roots, like dry, open, in the air roots. Apparently they don't care if they have soil or not. They slowly work their way to the ground. Once they find the ground, man, they're dropping in more cables, and literally they begin to swallow the tree. There was palm trees that were swallowed, completely swallowed by these other trees, and those trees just grow 40, 50, 60, 70 feet up into the air like nobody's business, and they just devour everything around them. But all of those little roots getting shot down everywhere, into where it becomes almost indistinguishable to tell which was the original part of the tree. Because every time you look at like one of the roots, it connects over to this side, and then it goes from that side over to this other side, and there's just trees everywhere until it literally becomes like you can have 50, 60, 70 basically trees, all the same tree, interconnected, but they're indistinguishable. Like you can't see the one without seeing all the others. And I'm realizing more and more, like that's how the scripture is. Every time you read it, if you actually like chew on it all the time, continually eat it, like just eat the scriptures. It's so uncommon these days. And I think it's probably always been somewhat uncommon. There's probably people and individuals at time that genuinely regarded this words as something super precious, and they thought about it and they talked about it all the time, and those words were always in their mouth. And they start to see all these parallels and connections. Like, how is it possible that Peter, when he would reference a story in the scriptures, letters that he's writing, he'd reference 6, 8, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 other things from the scriptures? Because that stuff was always in their minds. They were always thinking about it. They were always talking about it. Like when they went out of their house, they talked about it. When they got up in the morning, they talked about it. They thought about it. Like they continually had the words of Yahweh in their mouth. And when you have that, you suddenly start to see the parallels in the scripture. Like all of the scripture is completely interconnected, like that giant tree. Like it's indistinguishable. Once you have read it, and especially like I predominantly came from a mostly New Testament Christian mentality my whole life. And then I started regarding and considering like the importance of the Old Testament. The covenants are important from beginning to end. And I should probably come to know those better. Because, you know, when they witness to people in the renewed Testament timeframes, they always would reference like Moses as in the prophets as being everything you needed to tell people about the Messiah. And I was like, I have no idea how to evangelize to people with Moses and the prophets. Probably because I don't know Moses and the prophets very well, which is so true because I've been reading Amos, and I realize Amos is absolutely astounding human. He was a farmer, shocker, an animal cattle keeper, and apparently he grew Smyrna figs. This translation in Amos 8 says he grew Smyrna figs. He's like, I'm not a prophet. I'm a cattle farmer. I'm a herdsman. And I grow Smyrna figs. But one day the words of Yahweh came into his mouth, and he, like fire in his bones, had to spit them out. People didn't like that. Shocker. Most people don't like the word. Don't worry. We're getting back to the storehouses of Joseph now, because that's where my mind went when I read Deuteronomy 28. Storehouses. Joseph's job, right? He gets rejected by his brothers. They're like, hey, you know what? Here comes our brother. What should we do? Murder him, obviously, because he's favored and everybody likes him more than us. Jealousy, not good. Terrible. Breaking the commandments is on its way. So they throw him in a pit full of terrible things. Then they sell him out. Literally sell him out. Sell out. Human trafficking goes down. They traffic him off to one group of humans. They sell him off to somebody else. Now Joseph's really in a bad stretch. He gets sold off to be a slave in a guy's named Potiphar's house. In that guy's house, things go from awesome to nawsome real fast. Joseph goes from, he gets like super favored by Potiphar to where he's in charge of all the house, because apparently Joseph had some amazing administration skills. Outstanding human manager, apparently it was Joseph. So, but then his wife accuses him of raping, or Joseph attempting to rape her, which was a lie. and she tore his garment, which was likely also linen at the time. But he runs away from her, leaves his garment in his hands. Well played. Turns out terrible for him, though, because he ends up in a prison this time. But don't worry, he gets the favor of the guards there. And then he ends up where? In prison for longer. But he's interpreting dreams and crushing life, which is awesome. But people that he interpreted their dreams, like the baker of Pharaoh and the guy who had his cup in his hand, the guy who would squeeze the grapes into Pharaoh's hands, into the cup taster. I don't know if it was really the way that we've all been brainwashed to believe, like the guy would sit there and be like, yeah, it's fine, you can drink this now, it's safe, I didn't die. I don't know if it was really like that or what that really looked like, because I've never personally done it, so can't tell you yet. But one day Pharaoh has all these dreams, right? And he calls Joseph up because they hear he's the guy who can interpret dreams. And they call him up and they bring him out of prison, and apparently he was filthy. I just put out a video the other day of me completely covered in filth from the underside of my RV that I scrubbed with a wire brush. Savage. But Joseph, they call him up. He interprets the dream, and he gives it an idea here. You ready for this? Let's jump in. This is going to be Genesis somewhere. You ready? Yeah, you ready for this? Check this out. And the lean heads swallowed the 7 good heads of wheat. And I spoke to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. This is Pharaoh talking to Joseph. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of wheat are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 lean and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads scorched by the east wind are 7 years of scarcity of food. This is the word which I spoke to Pharaoh. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. See, 7 years of great plenty are coming in the land of Mitzrayim, but after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Mitzrayim, and the scarcity of food shall destroy the land, and the plenty shall not be remembered in the land, because the scarcity of food following it, for it is very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the word is established by Elohim, and Elohim is hastening to do it. If you haven't read the Bible, it says, let every matter be established by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. This is that principle being executed in Genesis. Principle of first mention, meaning from the beginning. If you hear it in the scriptures, from the first mention of it is where all the rest of the times it's later mentioned are built upon. That's called like the cornerstone, the foundation point of it. You can't build a house on anything but that. So if you're trying to build a doctrine on anything other than the starting point, the roof's going to be crooked, y'all. Sooner or later, you're going to get leaks. It's not good. You don't want water dripping on your face when you're trying to sleep. Trust me. Anyways. And the dream was repeated. And now let Pharaoh, this is where Joseph crosses the threshold from interpreting the dream to giving wisdom and administration. Check this out. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Mitzrayim. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land to take up 1/5 of the land of Mitzrayim in the 7 years of plenty, and let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming and store up grain. That's wheat. It could be other kinds of grain. I recognize this. Hang in there. Under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And the food shall be for a store for the land, for the 7 years of scarcity of food, which shall be in the land of Mitzrayim. And do not let the land be cut off by the scarcity of food. And the word was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, could we find another like him? A man in whom is the spirit of Elohim. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. Be over my house, you yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne am I greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh took his signet ring, off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he dressed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck and had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, "Bow the knee!" And he set him over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without a word from you let no man lift his hand or foot in all the land of Mitzrayim." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath Paneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. And Joseph went and ruled over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the sovereign of Mitzrayim. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout the land of Mitzrayim. And in the 7 years of plenty, the good ground brought forth generously. And he gathered all the food of the 7 years which were laid up in the land of Mitzrayim, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Thus Joseph gathered very much grain, as is the sand of the sea, until he ceased counting, for it was without number. You see this? This is his storehouses being blessed. You think Joseph was the only guy who was storing up grain during the years of plenty? Don't you think other people tried to store it up? They're like, "Hey, you guys notice how Joseph's building all these silos everywhere? Maybe we should build some silos, because a measure of grain is now yielding 100 measures in return, or 1,000 measures in return. We should store that up, right?" There's some other semi-historical or historical accounts in other books that talk about how lots of other people tried to store up grain during this great years of plenty. But you know what happened? Rats got in. Animals would get in. Pests were getting into their crops and getting into the grain storehouses. And their storehouses were literally being destroyed. Because as a farmer, I've literally witnessed this personally. You can do everything right. Everything right. And especially if you keep livestock, like human beings or animals, okay? If you do it right and you store up, like for the winter, because there's seasons where stuff doesn't grow, right? And it's not like there's always a Tractor Supply store where you can get hay in the middle of winter and pay $10 a bale. Instead, you could like buy it when it's fresh, right? And it's $20 for an entire giant 800-pound monstrosity of a wheel. I don't know what those are called. Bales, big bales. I'm sorry. Some of you more technical farmers will get that right. But you could store up 800 pounds for $20, or you can get 20 pounds for $10 in the winter, right? So you try to store it up right. I had to try to build a storehouse for hay when I was at a property. And you know what? We used the materials we had at hand, which is freebies, right? Bamboo and metal sheets that we got off, Craigslist for free. And it's super hard to do. It's super hard to store up stuff for plenty and lack seasons. It's really difficult because there's these things that want to eat it too, like mice, murderous mice, murderers. Mice are horrible, horrible creatures. Obviously, they were great before the curse, but now they're nightmares. And they eat everything, and they make nests in everything, and they poo and pee in everything. It's just terrible decisions they make to eat all the grain for the animals. So apparently that's what was going down in Egypt too. And all these people that were trying to store up grain for the famine that was coming obviously failed. Because as the story goes on, nobody in the earth, nobody anywhere around could have any grain. Everybody had other foods too. Don't forget, the people of Israel, like Israel, the children of Israel, Reuben, Simeon, the people that sold Joseph to be a slave, they had to come to Joseph down in Egypt to get grain, because grain is life. You can live off bread alone. If you ate milled bread, fresh milled bread, it would heal you guys. But they came down there to get grain because that was the only place that had grain. Remember, the Israelites like Simeon and Reuben and Issachar, they brought almonds and honey and some figs, right? They still were growing food, just not grain. But you need grain to live. These people understood that. Our society's been broken to believe that the grain that they sell us in the store is real. Like, hey, there's bread here. No, there's not. You've never probably eaten real bread in your life. Really. Almost none of you. Unless it's been milled fresh immediately and then baked and eaten, you've never eaten bread. It's shocking, but it's real. You've also probably never eaten meat ever in your life. It's shocking, but it's true. You know why I know this? Because I saw the animals that they call meat, and they're not meat. They're dead. You know why? Because here's what's happening. Joseph He's a man who regards the words of Elohim. He listens and he cares about it. And because of that, the spirit of Elohim is in him. Out of Pharaoh's mouth, they said this. Hey, guess what? Spirit of Elohim's in that guy. That guy's full of wisdom and truth. And you know what happened? Yahweh blessed the storehouses of Mitzrayim, Egypt. They got all the blessings. This is where all the fortunes of Egypt came from. That later, those same Egyptians would turn on the Israelites and become their taskmasters. But you know what? Yahweh's like, I got something for you. All of you are using your strength and your wit and your cruelty to punish Israel. At the end of all the plagues and the judgments and the cataclysms and the hail and the darkness and the cattle dropping dead in the field and the firstborns being killed and murdered by the destroying angel, after that, they're going to ask for all that silver and gold back that you plundered the nations with during the time of Joseph. They took that same gold and that silver. Here's some gold. They took some gold and silver from those people. Here's some silver. Okay? They took that from them, and then they took that into the wilderness, and they made that into the tabernacle. The very covering pieces of the throne, the mercy seat of Yahweh, came from the gold that Joseph was blessed by. The gold that was put upon Joseph's neck, the linen that Joseph was given, literally became the garments for the priests of Yahweh. You want to talk about mishpat? That's justice. That's justice. It says justice and righteousness are the foundations of Yahweh's throne. Those are literally the cornerstones of his throne, justice and righteousness. Every time you read in the scripture, like we just read about here with Joseph, when you read about fine linen, white linen, like this, I put on white linen for this episode. Woohoo! I'm about to work in this shirt because it's hot all the time, always for me, anytime I work. So I'm wearing white linen in the heat, and it's awesome. It'll never look this nice again. Chelsea just cut the collar off of this and did some sweet stitching. I can't remember what it's called. Sledging or stecking. I don't know. Some kind of special stitch. He cut the collar off this, cut sleeves straight off this thing, so I have sleeves that are shorter now. Amazing. Fine linen, every time you read that in the scripture, this is what you should hear. The righteous works of the saints, of the people, the Yachid, like the disciples. The righteousness. It's the righteous words. It's synonymous. Meaning you could interchange every time in the scriptures, and we'll get to the verses that all say this, but I'm teasing you guys a little bit. Every time you read about linen, it literally is the righteous works of the saints. It's the righteousness of us. What was Yeshua clothed in? Swaddling clothes. What was he buried in? He was anointed like the priest, right? Okay, I'm getting too ahead of myself. But all of these ingredients of what Joseph was blessed, how the Father blessed Joseph, literally became the things that he used to bless his people by giving the Levites their covering. The Levites are the other ones that had to wear linen garments in order to go into the tabernacle, which was a giant white linen fence that they had to go in, a giant barrier fence of linen with a bunch of bodyguards, savage warrior Levite priests that were also probably wearing linen body armor called the linothorax. Go look up Making the Kingly Armor, one of my videos. I go into that. Linen armor, by the way. And then they had gold and silver that they used for all of the implements, for the tabernacle, for the fire pokers, for the altar of incense. Like they used all these materials that the Father materially blessed Israel with during the days of Joseph to become the things that provided for Israel. The interaction, the relational communication point, a place where relationships could be restored and strengthened with our Father, and where people's relationships could be restored. Forgiveness, mercy, deliverance, healing, justice, judgments, righteousness could be dealt out. All took place inside that kingdom. This is the sword of the covenant. It talks about the kingdom of Yahweh. This is the description of what that kingdom looked like. These are some of the things that are in that kingdom. I want you guys to learn about it and regard it, because I have begun to regard it. When I saw with my eyes those cows eating the waste excrement of our mega agricultural industrial complex's food production society, when I saw them eating that, I saw the cursed cattle from Pharaoh's dream. I saw those animals that we have been living in our society, the United States of America, right? The land of the plumed serpent. We are living under the curse as the people who are facing the 7 years of famine in the days of Egypt, of Joseph and Pharaoh. Those cows are no different. They may have more fat on them. They may have meat on them, but they are dead things walking. And you know what has become us? We have become like them because we have not regarded to preserve and protect the tabernacle of our bodies. It's called a temple of the set apart spirit, the Holy Spirit. We're supposed to treat our bodies as we would his temple, his tabernacle, which was to be covered in fine linen, silver and gold, purple and scarlet, beautiful tapestries, the most finely crafted, ornate coverings that were ever produced came into that place. That was supposed to be what our adorning is. We should treat and regard our bodies and guard what goes into our bodies, what goes into our eyes and our ears. We should protect it, guard it, like Adam in the garden, right? He had weapons, right? You know this, right? Adam had serious weapons. Do you understand this? Why do we not think of Adam as a guardian, as a warrior? His legitimate job could have been to cut the head off of the serpent back then in the garden when it spoke blasphemies, when it raised up words that were leading his wife astray. He should have cut the serpent's head off then, crushed its head. He had all the power to do it. He had all the authority to do so. Because you know what? That was a transgressor in his midst that was seducing by subtle, crafty deceit. You want to hear about subtle, crafty deceit? 2 Peter, y'all. This is what our society has done to make you think the food you eat is actually food. It's not. It's a liar's mouth. You're literally eating the mouth of the serpent when you go and eat these poison meats, these poison grains. When you buy refined flour, you're eating poison. Even if it's organic, guys, refined white flour is poison to you. It will make you fat. That's why kings got fat back then, because they hired servants to sift the bran and the germ out of their flour so they could have the delicate pastries of kings. Check this out. But there also came to be, 2 Peter 2, but there also came to be false prophets among the people, as also among you there shall be false teachers, who shall secretly bring in destructive heresies and deny the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. And many shall follow their destructive ways, and because of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of, and in greed, with fabricated words, they shall use you for gain. From of old their judgment does not linger, and their destruction does not slumber. For if Elohim did not spare the messengers who sin, but sent them to Tartarus, that's the angels from Genesis 6, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be kept for judgment. You guys, there's liars who their job is to be false apostles of light. It says, marvel not, for Hasatan, the adversary, shapeshifts himself. Meta skids modzatoi. He's a shapeshifter, transforms himself into an angel of light. And his apostles and workers, ministers, priests, kings, knights, presidents, politicians, they do likewise. CEOs, business owners. And you know what they bring in? Heresies, falsehood. They wink the eye. They lie to you. They tell you one thing, and then they speak out of the other side of their mouth another thing. They're double speakers like the forked tongue of the serpent. They're subtle and they're crafty. Adam had a sword with him. That's the sharpest thing that's ever been. It's a sword that came out of his mouth. It says Yeshua, when he returns, okay, you ready for this? He's going to have a great sword that comes out of his mouth. Adam had that sword. Do you know when he didn't use it? When the first time that forked tongue of the serpent came out against mankind. First time it ever contended with us. He didn't cut its head off. But you know what? Another man, another Adam has come, and he has been a gardener, and he has guarded the words of his father perfectly. He did not fail. He did not linger at the sight of doubt. He didn't, when he was in the garden and being crushed, when he was being squeezed like an olive, being pressed down to release the oil that could be poured into a lamp, that could be set aflame so that like the menorah that would light the area, like the altar of incense, it could light the way to the mercy seat. It could bring you into the kingdom. He was squeezed until every drop of him was literally gushed out of his body. He was pressed out completely, emptying himself. And the Father poured himself into that vessel because he was kadosh, he was holy, he was set apart, and he was ready to be able to redeem, to draw us back to the Father, to wash us, to sanctify us, to decontaminate us so that we could come back into the kingdom, so that we could be clean to enter into his kingdom and then learn about our Father's ways, so we could be branded by that same signet ring of Yahweh as my people. You are to be a child of Yahweh. You are to be Israel. You are Israel. You are his people. Whether by blood or by belief, you can be brought into his kingdom, and you can enter into through the narrow gate, that narrow door at the big white linen fence. This is why his word needs to be regarded. Because you know what? Those that bring in these damnable heresies, those that bring in these accursed lying doctrines are feeding us death, and they're saying it's life. And they're lying to us. Just like every piece of meat that came out of that factory farm that was branded and approved by a governing agency as choice. Food for human consumption. Instead, they make you brand raw milk. If you got raw milk from cattle that are grass-fed on your local farm and you want to sell it to a human being, you have to literally say, not for human consumption, because raw milk could be potentially dangerous. It's 100% dangerous every time you guys drink pasteurized milk. Every time. Don't ever let it come into your body again because it's poison. Actually guard your body. I challenge you. Physically guard your body from eating poison. Don't allow it to come into your tabernacle. Don't allow that stuff to come in and infect your physical body, your skin suit, your tent. This is yours. He entrusted you that body, and it was wonderfully made, perfectly knit together by the fingers that carved into the sapphire tablets. Sapphire tablets, the covenant of his scripture. He carved with his finger the words of his instructions. He carved it with his fingers. But you know what it says in Jeremiah? He was knit together. Do you know how to knit? Man, it requires fingers to knit. I've watched my wife knit. Sorry, she crochets. They're different. It requires fingers. He knit us together in our mother's wombs. Well, no matter what kind of womb you came from, he knit you together with his fingers. As much as he wrote with his fingers the instructions for us to live, he also knit us together to live by those instructions so that we could enjoy the blessings of life. Deuteronomy 28 gives us wonderful opportunities to see what the blessings are. But you know what happens as Deuteronomy 28 goes along? You get like 14 verses of blessings. But then you get like 30, 40 verses of curses. And you know what? If you read those, like things like insanity, you're cursed with insanity. It literally says you'll go insane. You'll kill yourselves. You'll hate yourselves. You'll be depressed. You'll be miserable. Your children won't listen to you. Every symptom of our society that's wrong and broken is like the curses, guys. Because we're probably under the curses because we've disregarded the instructions of our Father who made us, who loved us, who cared about us, and who cherished a relationship with his people. But he will not force us. He will let us go. If you want to be out of my house, go. Go. Go live with them and see how they are. Like the prodigal son who went and lived with who? The people that fed and raised pigs. You know what you feed pigs on farms? The cattle farm was bad enough. I went to that place to learn animal husbandry. No, I went to the pig farm to learn animal husbandry. Because when we got to the pig farm, do you know what we saw there? They ate each other constantly. The pigs ate each other. The pigs ate pigs, which are the most diseased, some of the highest in toxicity. When you put pig in your mouth and you eat it and you put it into your body, you literally grow cancer cells. It activates cancer to grow in your body every time you eat pork. Like, legitimately. This isn't like spooky, crazy, out there, ethereal, conspiracy land science. It's like reality. Like you put pork in your body, you're literally poisoning yourself. You're like, hey, guess what? Let's eat some cancer today. Sure. Let's go to the store where they cook cancer sticks. Yeah. You want to buy some death sticks? You're that guy. You're like, it's okay. It's just a piece of bacon, right? No, it's poison to your body. And you're literally murdering yourself. And that's telling people what you think of your creator who gave you and entrusted to you that body. Women, if you're carrying life, you're entrusting your body. He's entrusting you another body. And if you're doing that, you're double dipping destruction upon yourself. He says, if we regard these people, if we pervert our way, we will go astray. And we will end up in these other Elohim's camps. And that's what's happened. We've all been ensnared by these other kingdoms. When I saw the pigs in this giant mega barn, there was thousands of pigs in this single barn. And it was the most putrid, acrid place I have ever been in my life. The stench was unbearable. Horrible. And you know what happened? These pigs were so diseased because they were being fed the lower tier from what the cows were even being fed. Because you know what? A pig is a waste eater. They're like the catfish of the hoofed animals. They're eating the poop. They literally can eat the waste of other animals. They will. They'll eat each other. They'll eat the dead carcasses. They're omnivorous. They're omnivorous. They'll go and eat the dead bodies of other animals like a vulture, just as much as they'll forage for roots and tubes and mushrooms, and they'll eat good stuff too, but they'll also eat the worst stuff when you make them eat each other's body. They eat each other's tails and ears, so they have to clip those off, because they're all cannibals in here. And you start to wonder why it is the society looks the way it does, why we're all cannibalistic and they're feeding us human body parts in all of our food constantly, guys. Our taskmasters are the curses. We have inherited the curses of our fathers because our fathers have given us lies. Jeremiah 10. We are the generation, like in Jeremiah 16, that suddenly wakes up and says, surely we've inherited lies. You're that generation. But if you will listen and regard these words, you know what's so beautiful? We can instead receive the blessings. And as for me and my house, we can choose to serve a different God, a different Elohim. We can choose to regard the words of this covenant and act righteously. We can do what he says. We can love him and say, I want to be in a relationship with the one who made this earth, the one who made the wonders and the marvels of the treasures. He made this. It's an emerald. It's beautiful. Maybe you can see that well. Maybe not. You know what? Let me show you how cool this is. This is a ruby, right? It's kind of a purplish, pinkish rock. But you know when I do this, it gets really cool. Oh, I'm going to have to turn off some lights so you can see it maybe a little better. Look at this. Let's see. Not quite as cool as I was hoping for. But the whole thing turns purple and red. It's awesome. It's beautiful. It radiates light. It scatters the light in such a beautiful and unique way. And you know what? He made that in a place that was unseeable forever. Since one day, one guy, some human out there, found that thing. And you know what? Then I found that thing. And I regarded it as something precious. And I valued it enough to pick it up and to bring it with me for thousands of miles. And to say, this is something special and that should be set apart and cherished and remembered. And I cared about this thing. But you know what? I didn't fashion it. I didn't form it. But now that I hold it, it's mine and I cherish it and I love it. And you know why? Because it's a reflective indicator to me of the Father's steadfastness, that even when I did not know him, he made a treasure for me that I one day would stumble upon and then share to the people that I could. That I would give it to everyone I could. Because you know what Joseph did? When he was given all the gold and the linen and the grain of the earth, when he was enriched by all the storehouses of the nations, when he was literally given every dollar that the Egyptians had, then all the gold that all the people had in all the earth, and all of their land, and all of their cattle, and all of their livestock, he was literally given all of it. You know what he did? He dispensed it out. Joseph's name is like the cup that pours out, like the cup that gives and dispenses life. That's Joseph. It's amazing. If you look in the Hebrew for the name Joseph, it's everywhere. It's like Nathan. There are these other names. There's certain names in scriptures that aren't just names. There's also the verb form of it, and they're everywhere. Joseph's is like that. It's from the beginning to the end of the book. Some of you guys, if you would learn your Hebrew letters of your name and then look into the letters of Hebrew, you would see your name is scattered all across the scriptures. And it's beautiful and it's marvelous and it's the greatest treasure hunt of your life. I love hunting for treasures. I have found, this was the first sapphire I ever found, right here. I wear this on a little thing I made because I call it my sapphire of understanding. That was the first sapphire I found. Looks basically like a rock, right? Except I can carve into metal with this. I can scratch any surface but a diamond with this. It's the hardest thing. Oh, there you go. You get a little facet right there. Shing kind of has a hexagon pattern that it grew in. But I didn't know it was a sapphire until a guy who knew what it was walked up to me and picked it up and said, this is a sapphire. And you know what he did? I had a bunch of other just rocks in this bag. And he goes, that's a sapphire. Pulls it out and he set it apart from all the rest. And he made that thing holy by doing that. It was then set apart and distinct from all the others. You know what I did with all the rest of those just rocks? I threw them out on the ground. You know what people did? They trampled them. Nobody cared about them anymore again. But this one, I cared about so much that I wear it around my neck, and I use it as a stone of testimony. And I give from this stone the words of life to everyone I can, and I tell them about the Creator, who I prayed diligently to give me a sapphire. And you know what he did? He enriched me with this one right here. And then another day, he enriched me with this one. And another day, he enriched me with emeralds like this. And he will give you anything you need as long as you give it away. My name is Nathan. It means to give. The more I give, the more he will give to me. It's the only way I get paid. I work by the sweat of my face. I'm a volunteer migrant worker, guys. I'm like on a different kind of bottom rung of the corporate ladder. I went from like collegiate jobs and all that stuff to like, hey, how can I volunteer to work on farms so I can eat and have somewhere to sleep with my family? That's what I do, guys. I don't get paid to be a farmer anywhere. I haven't been paid for like 4 years from a job kind of thing. I just volunteer because I want to be around the things that I think are the most valuable in the world, which is biblical living and authentic human beings who work by the sweat of their face. Farmers are some of the smartest, most intelligent, wise people I have ever talked to in my life. They're multifaceted in their wonders because they'll talk about microbiology of soil and all these things that live inside soil and soil regeneration and protozoa and phytokines and plant defense mechanisms and sunlight, and they know the seasons based off of their own intuitions and physically being outside all the time. They have an understanding of business and dealings with people, human beings, and corporate contracts and restaurants and farmers markets, and they have people skills or not sometimes. They have animal husbandry, animal sciences. They have a diversity of knowledge when they do things the natural way. But when they get enslaved to these damnable heresies, when they get sucked into that corporate model of greed and just bigger, better machinery and farms and agro products and fertilizers, and it's a crazy different world that it dissociates them from the natural way of living. And because of that, they become products of Babylon. When we finish our study on linen, you know, the last occurrences of linen is the people who come back riding with Yeshua on their white horses to bring justice and judgment, and they're all clothed in fine linen. The angels of Yahweh, when they come to do war and battle, they're wearing fine linen, the white linen robes of the saints who are beheaded and given a fine robe. Linen, it's all linen, guys, because that's the righteous works of his people. And you know what? But there's also somebody else out there who makes linen. And we're going to have to talk about them too. And they're those false, damnable heresy people, right? Like Babylon the great harlot who seduced mankind. Revelation 18. Let's just do it real quick. You know what? Hang in there, y'all. I'm going to give it to you. Double barrels right now. Let's do it. Check this out. Revelation 18. It's the only book in the Bible where it says if you read this, you get a special blessing. So read Revelation occasionally, as in regularly, if you want an eternal blessing every time you do. Store some treasure in heaven. And after this, I saw another messenger coming down from the heavens, having great authority, and the earth was lightened from his esteem. And he cried with a mighty voice, saying, Babel, the great, is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a haunt for every unclean and hated bird, because all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her whoring, and the sovereigns of the earth have committed whoring with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through power of her righteous living. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues, because her sins have piled up to reach the heaven, and Elohim has remembered her unrighteousness. Render to her as she indeed did render, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed for her, mix her double. As much as she esteemed herself and lived riotously, so much torture and grief give to her, because in her heart she says, I sit as a sovereigness, and I am not a widow, and I do not see mourning at all. Because of this, her plague shall come in one day, death and mourning and scarcity of food, and she shall be burned up with fire, because Yahweh Elohim, who judges her, is mighty. And the sovereigns of the earth, who committed whoring and lived riotously with her, shall weep and mourn over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torture, saying, Woe! Woe! The great city Babel, the mighty city, because your judgment has come in 1 hour. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their merchandise any more. Merchandise of gold and silver and precious stone and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and citron wood and every object of ivory and every object of the most precious wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and incense and fragrant oil and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and horses and carriages and bodies and the souls of men. And the fruit that your being longed for has gone from you, and all your riches and splendor are lost to you, and you shall find them no more at all. The great harlot traffics in the souls of men, your mind, your will, and your emotion. Why you are willing to put poison in your body is because your soul is not your own. You can say you believe in the Bible. You can say that you are a follower of him. But if you do not regard what you put in your mouth, the water you drink, the food you eat, the clothes that go on your body, you do not regard the one who made you. Because there's a saying, and it goes like this. We can see what you think about by how you live your life. Do you know what I mean by that? How you treat his creation, how you treat it, tells me what you think of the Creator. So if you treat your body terribly, if you put poison in your body, it's because you think he is poisonous, and his words are poisonous, and you disregard them. But he said, guard your body, guard the covenant, guard your relationships. 10 commandments, 10 words. 4 of them, all about your relationship with him. The other 6, all about your relationship with each other. If you regard those words, if you walk by them, your life will be blessed with him and with each other. It's a beautiful thing. If you didn't know it, this isn't the first Babel that was judged. Ezekiel 27 is another time where fine linen and another great kingdom that had risen up was judged. You ready for this? Check this out, guys. I've been reading a lot lately and not doing a lot of videos, so you guys are getting a full onslaught right now. So I hope you're still hanging in there. If I haven't offended you yet, just hang in there. I'll work on it. You ready for this? Okay. The word of Yahuwah came again to me, saying, Now, son of man, take up a lamentation for Zor, and you shall say to Zor, this is Tyre, often translated Tyre, which is a real place. Remember, the Bible's a history book, y'all. You can go look up Tyre. It's an island that was kind of man-made, but it was right off the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and it was an abundantly rich place, and you'll read why. Ready? You who dwell at the entrance to the sea, merchants of the people on many coastlands, thus said to the Master Yahuwah, O Zor, you and yourself has said, I am perfect in loveliness. This should sound like Babylon again. Your borders are in the heart of the sea. Your builders have perfected your loveliness. They have made all your timbers of fine trees from Senir, and they took cedar from Lebanon to make you a mast. From the oaks of Bashan they made your oars. They made your deck with ivory from the coasts of Kittim. Of fine embroidered linen from Mitzrayim was your sail, to serve you as a banner. Of blue and purple from the coasts of Elisha was your covering. The inhabitants of Sidon and Arad were your seamen. Your wise men, O Zor, were in you. They were your sailors. The elders of Gebal It is wise men were in you, repairing your seams. All the ships of the sea and their seamen were in you to trade your merchandise. Those from Persia, Lud, and Put were in your army as men of battle. Shield and helmet they hung up within you. They gave splendor to you. The sons of Arwad and your army were on your walls all around, and the Gammadites were in your towers. They hung their shields on your walls all around. They perfected your loveliness. Tarshish was your merchant because of your great wealth. They gave you silver, iron, and tin, and lead for your merchandise. Yawan and Tubal, Meshech were your traders. They exchanged slaves and objects of bronze for your merchandise. Those from the house of Targuma exchanged horses and horsemen and mules for your merchandise. The men of Dedan traded with you, and many islands were your market. They brought you ivory tusks and ebony as payment. Aram was your merchant because of the multitude of your works. They gave you emeralds, purple, and embroidery, and fine linen. Where's my fine linen? Fine linen. And corals and rubies for your wares. Oh, I had coral. I dropped my coral. Coral. And rubies for your wares. Yahuda and the land of Yasharel were your traders. For your merchandise, they exchanged wheat. This is what Israel exported. Israel literally thought wheat was their currency. If you store up wheat, you might be the house of currency in the land. Just saying. Or if you store up cattle. Just saying. Maybe learn to be a farmer. Super valuable livestock management skills right now. And early figs like Amos. And honey and oil and balm, resin. Watch my video called Gibborim Gum. Damascus was your merchant because of the multitude of your works, because of your great wealth of goods, with the wine of Helbon and with white wool. Wedan and Yawan from Uzal paid for your wares. They exchanged wrought iron and cassia and odorous cane for your merchandise. Dedan traded with you in saddlecloths for riding, and Arabia and all the princes of Kedar were merchants for you. In lambs and rams and goats they were your merchants. The traders of Sheba and Ramah were your traders. They paid for your wares with the choicest spices and all the kinds of precious stones and gold. Haran and Kamna, Edan and traders of Sheba, Asherah, Kilmad traded with you. They traded with you in your perfect items, in purple cloths, in embroidered linen garments, in chests of multicolored cloths, in strong twined cords. Linen, tow linen, is like the strongest cord. They used it for ships' cords and stuff like that. It's all linen, guys. Hang in there. Among your merchandise, the ships of Tarshish were the travelers of your merchandise, and you were filled and richly laden in the heart of the seas. Your seamen brought you into many waters, but the east wind broke you in the heart of the seas. Your wealth and your wares, your merchandise, your mariners and your sailors, your repairers of seams, and your dealers in merchandise, and all your fighting men who are in you, and the entire company which is in your midst shall go down into the heart of the seas on the day of your fall. The coasts shaking at the sound of the cry of your sailors, and all the oarsmen and the mariners and the sailors of the sea shall come down from their ships. They shall stand on the shore, and they shall raise their voice and cry bitterly over you, and cast dust on their heads, rolling themselves in ashes. And they shall shave themselves bald because of you, and shall gird themselves with sackcloth, and shall weep for you with the bitterness of heart and bitter wailings. And in their wailing they shall take up a lamentation, and they shall lament for you and say, who is cut off in the midst of the sea like Zoar? When your wares went out by sea, you have filled many peoples. With your great wealth and your merchandise, you have made the sovereigns of the earth rich. In the time you are broken by the seas, in the depths of the waters, your merchandise and all your company shall fall in your midst. All the inhabitants of the isles shall be astonished at you, and their sovereigns shall be greatly afraid. Their faces shall be troubled. The merchants among the people shall whistle at you. you shall become a horror and be no more forever. And this word that came out of the mouth of Yahweh by the servant Ezekiel came to pass. In a day, they all were destroyed. They'd never been conquered until one person came in and destroyed them. He built an island. He built a bridge out to the island that was unconquerable and smote that place in a day. And you know what happened? Their great people, everything you just heard about came to pass. Look it up. The fall of Tyre. Unbelievable destruction. Most humans have no idea what that kind of destruction physically looks like. Unless you've survived a Holocaust, unless you have survived a genocide, you don't even know. There is no movie that can show you this. Utter, absolute, without question, destruction, decimation, eradication, destruction on such a level that the stones themselves are turned to dust. Do you know when this is going to happen again? Revelation, right? The reason I got here, guys, was because I read a passage in John 2. This is how I like banyan treat over here. You know what I mean? I read this passage in John 2. Here's what I read. I was trying to find times where like people made weapons, because I want to read about biblical weapons. I want to make every weapon that the Bible makes, right? I made a knife. I want to make a sword really, really bad. I want to make a double-edged sword, like a leaf blade design. I want to make a super sweet double-edged sword someday, out of like copper, silver, and gold, and then clothe it in fine linen and all this stuff. Anyways, I want to make weapons from the Bible. And do you know what? Yeshua personally made a weapon one time that we know of, where he personally made a weapon. That's awesome. And you know what's so great about it? It's in the beginning of his story. Check this out. And the Pesach of the Yahudim, Passover, was near, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem, and he found in the set-apart place, the big white temple, linen fence, that place that was supposed to be that place, gold from Egypt, that place. He found in there, the set-apart place, people selling oxen and sheep and doves and money exchangers sitting. And he made a whip of cords. He drove them all out of the set-apart place with the sheep and the oxen and poured out the money changers' coins and overturned the tables. And he said to those selling doves, "Take these away. Do not make the house of my father a house of merchandise." And the taught ones remembered that it was written, "The order of your house has eaten me up." And Yahudim answered and said to him, "What sign do you show to us, since you are doing this?" And Yeshua answered and said to them, "Destroy this dwelling place, and in 3 days I shall raise it up." And the Yahudim said, "It took 46 years to build this dwelling place, and you're going to raise it in 3 days?" But he spoke about the dwelling place of his body, the set-apart dwelling place of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his taught ones remembered that he had said to them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Yeshua had said. And when he was in Jerusalem at the Pesach, at the festival, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he was doing. But Yeshua was not entrusting himself to them, because he knew all men, and had no need that anyone should witness of man, for he knew what was in man. Psalm 118 tells us what is in man. It says, "Better to trust in Yahweh than to put your confidence in man." What is in man? The deceitfulness of riches, merchandising. Do you guys see the link of merchandise? I wanted to know what merchandise actually meant. So I looked up from the beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation, every time it said merchandise. It doesn't take too long, guys. You can look up in an interlineary or a concordance every time a word is used in the Bible. And then you can read what the actual definition is. If you go to like Webster's dictionary or Merriam-Webster's dictionary, you know, if you read like how they get a definition, you know what they almost always do? They quote other books of how it was used. Like they'll quote Shakespeare, which is written by a bunch of occultists, right? They'll quote demonic doctrines of demons to get the definitions for the words that they say what they mean. Why don't you just, if you want to know what a word means, just look in the Bible. Anything you want to know ever is in here. Like merchandise. So why was Yeshua so personally upset? Because people were setting up the whore's camp. They brought the Babylonian system inside the big white linen fence into the tabernacle. They had brought into the Kodesh Kodashim, the holy place, the most holy place on the earth. Like Jerusalem is where the apple of Yeshua's, like Yahweh's eyes. Like if you want to know where his eyes are, that place. He says that city right there, that spot, doop, right there, giant exclamation point right here. Look there. The mercy seat, there was one of one in all of the world. It was there that his mercy, he would come down in fire and sit there and talk to Moses to his face. He would sit there. And you know what happened? People were supposed to bring, when they wanted to bring offerings to pay a tithe. Biblical tithing, guys, like the modern version of Christianity, the merchandisers of Christianity, they've merchandised, they've sown false doctrines into our faith to get us for a gain. They've convinced us that tithing means give 10% of your money to us. And they base it off of a scripture sometimes. Because a lot of times, you know what tithing was to the Levites? Grain, cattle, oxen, clothing. Like literally, sometimes silver and gold. But it was predominantly food. The Levites were basically paid in food. That's what they were for. They were paid in clothing too. You remember Samuel's mom would make him a garment every year when she would bring it to him when he was being a priest, becoming a priest. They would pay them in clothing too. They would pay them in things they needed to enact and do their services. But instead of it being like that, the whore of Babylon, those false prophets who spoke deceitfully, had seduced themselves, had lied their way in and stolen the priesthood from the Zadok priests. That's who David helped to set up the priesthood, Zadok. The sons of Zadok should have carried that priesthood forever. Instead, there's these usurpers that came in. We read about like the Pharisees and all this stuff. It's important to learn history, guys, because it's real and you can see this stuff with your eyes. They stole the priesthood and they set up merchandising in the very sanctuary of his place that was supposed to be most precious, most guarded. And so you know what? Yahweh raised up his son to personally go in there and braid a weapon set apart. He made one weapon for one job, to drive that filth out of his house. He did it with violence. And you know what? You should look upon these things that are destroying you, toxins that are coming into your body, into your eyes, into your ear gates. And you should look at it with violence to drive that stuff out of your life. To literally, we have thrown so much food out of our house and driven it away, gotten it so far away from us, and I am disciplining my mind and rewiring my body to recognize what is food and what is not food, what is fabric, what is not fabric, what is living authentically, biblically, and what is not. Because I want to make myself set apart. I want to make myself a clean vessel for him. I want to be like a washed golden vessel that could be poured into and pure flames could come out of me. If I had a dirty vessel, a dirty lamp, if I had the wicks, by the way, here's what we're told. The oil from the pressings of those olives, they would use that to light the candles. It was said that the priests would take their linen garments after their year's service and they would turn those into the wicks that would light the candles in those Kodesh places, in those set-apart holy places. Those very garments became the thing that were then given up to be a flame that would light the way for the people of the earth to see that there was still a lamp burning that would never be extinguished, that would never perish, that would always point away out of the darkness of this world and say, there is righteousness, there is freedom, that is deliverance over there. Go to that where the light is. Because there is no darkness in our Father in heaven. There is no darkness or shadow of turning in him. He is light. And you know what? That's what his people are supposed to be. The ones who bear forth his light, his truth, his mercy, his power, his explosive mightiness should be coming forth from us and radiating the earth with wonder and marvelous mercy and truth and patience and kindness and ferocity for his ways. That is the weapons that he is trying to forge each and every one of us into. And when you turn all of that carnality, all of that Babylonian system, when you drive that out of you, when you come out of her and you separate yourself from that whore that you've been yoked to, when you cleave that off of you, you become set apart for him. And then you you can be set on fire to burn brightly. Then you will have stored enough oil up to burn brightly no matter what season may come your way, because you will hear his voice and you will do what he says. You will guard his words. That's a little more than I was ready to dive into with you guys, but I love each and every one of you, and I thank you so much for pressing in. It's such a critical time. There's no greater time to be alive. You're living in the greatest time of all of human creation. It is marvelous, and it is a wonderful opportunity. You were entrusted to live for such a time as this. If you haven't read the book of Esther, I highly encourage you. That's where I get a lot of this saying from, where it says, the days are evil, but take good courage, be of good cheer, because you were born for such a time as this. Those were the words that Esther, her father, said to her when he told her, please go and advocate for our people, rescue our people. You were born, you were set in that exact spot. Each and every one of you was placed exactly in a specific location for such a time as this, to be a strategist in the heart of darkness, to burn brightly for his kingdom. I pray that you would be set afire with his wondrous glory and in his perfect time and in his perfect way. I love you. I will talk to you soon. Never stop living dangerously. And obviously, look for that linen.